How do you protect yourself against someone you trust? The answer is you can't because you don't. If you trust someone, that is it. You simply trust him or her. The psychopath knows this and exploits it to his advantage. We're going to start off with a number of definitions. The psychopath is sometimes referred to as the sociopath, the criminal personality, the antisocial personality. Now, just on a point of order, if you're at your next dinner party and you refuse the second glass of white wine and somebody calls you antisocial, you have my permission to stand up and smack them. Although there is some debate in the circles of people far more intelligent than I am about the distinction between the sociopath and the psychopath, I think that the most accurate real-world description of the condition is the following: a remorseless liar who appears honest. Kaplan and Sadok wrote the voluminous reference work. They were the editors, and it gets updated constantly, that you find on the desks of doctors, general practitioners, clinicians, psychologists. And they went the route of describing the disorder as antisocial, and they say the following. I'm going to quote them verbatim because we will keep on coming back to these themes. Antisocial personality disorder patients do not tell the truth and cannot be trusted to carry out any task or adhere to any conventional standard of morality. In prison populations, the prevalence of antisocial personality disorder may be as high as 75%. Antisocial personality disorder patients are highly represented by so-called conmen. A notable finding is a lack of remorse for their actions. That is, these patients appear to lack a conscience. Once an antisocial personality disorder develops, it runs an unremitting course. Patients with antisocial personality disorder often present a normal and even a charming and ingratiating exterior. They are highly manipulative. The patients may appear composed and credible in an interview. A very useful distinction on the types of psychopaths or sociopaths or antisocials that we find was proposed by Mullins Nelson, who wrote that there is a distinction simply between the unsuccessful psychopath and the successful psychopath. The unsuccessful psychopath ends up in prison or in the morgue. The successful psychopath ends up in the corner office running the show. Now I'm going to bore you with a couple of small did-you-know facts. Approximately 1% of individuals are psychopathic. Psychopaths are found in all societies. Now, this is particularly relevant for those of us who like to choose your group, criticize the Japanese for killing whales, or criticize the Somalis for being pirates, and then generalizing that, well, they all are sociopathic. The research has found that this 1% average is found in all societies. There are both male and female psychopaths. It is impossible to rehabilitate a psychopath. Psychopaths do know the difference between right and wrong, they just don't care. And then the kicker, although I criticize them severely, it is not a crime to be a psychopath. Because we are discussing the successful psychopath in the context of the business organization or the NGO or the like, we need to spend some time to debunk a number of myths surrounding psychopaths. Someone like Kevin Dutton from Oxford tends to write in an almost glorifying way about psychopaths, describing them as cold-blooded, feelingless individuals, and then makes the logic jump to assume that if you are feelingless and cold, you are automatically more focused and better at your job. Research in the corporate environment has proved that psychopaths do not perform better than their peers. The anomaly that is worrying in this case is that it was found that even with the worst of performance appraisals, it was the psychopath that invariably got promoted every time. And anecdotal evidence, as well as the limited amount of research that David and myself carried out in South Africa, showed that unfair promotions were probably the single most bothersome aspect of the individuals that we surveyed during our research. The problem here is that people, and we could probably blame the mass media for this, people tend to think of the psychopath as an analogy for a badly tempered dog that can be controlled by its owner, in the sense that it'll be cruel and dangerous to others, but will show loyalty to us. This is a very, very dangerous fallacy. The psychopath is incapable of forming loyalty to anyone except himself. Thinking that you will be able to use him for your dirty work or for making the tough decisions will inevitably lead to your own and or your organization's downfall. Continuing in this vein, we can state categorically that the myth that psychopaths have no emotions is patently false. Psychopaths can get very worked up over the slightest perceived threat to them. Behavioral characteristics are disrupting of meetings, as an example, throwing tantrums, generally being a nuisance, wasting a lot of people's time and energy. Another myth that's been popularized by the media, who obviously Hollywood does read Kevin Dutton, is that psychopaths have courage. We must be careful of not being caught up in semantics. There is a difference between recklessness and courage. Psychopaths are characterized by recklessness, but very rarely have courage. Courage means overcoming your fear in aid of assisting someone else. And an individual incapable of feeling remorse or loyalty will not display such behavior. All of this leads, of course, to the next false presumption, that psychopaths make strong leaders. Simply being a bully does not make you a leader. Taking responsibility makes you a leader. You will find in the corporate scenario that the psychopath is very good at shifting blame and very good at taking the credit for work done by others, including financial results. We've already discussed the fact that the psychopath cannot be rehabilitated. Research by Joshelson and Semino in the United States, spanning 50-odd years, proved that therapy for psychopaths only increased their psychopathic behavior, in the sense that over the years of receiving therapy, they became more adept at fishing out what the therapist or the interviewer wanted to hear and feeding it back to them. The final myth that I want to deal with is that based on all of this, there's the presumption that psychopaths are strategic thinkers. Yes, if you see strategy as an alternative to getting any work done, that would be the case. Because of their impulsive nature and because of their desire for instant gratification, psychopaths are not able to form a long-term view of anything. And if there's one thing that strategy formulation requires, it is taking a long-term view. The bad news is not over, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to severely criticize South African organizations and specifically recruitment agencies, because the way that we've traditionally done the recruitment and the way it's currently being done is an open invitation and an open door for a psychopath to enter your organization. We start off generally with advertising, resume collection, and interviews, and then an appointment. All of this suits the psychopath just fine. Being of deceitful nature and adept liars, the chances of a psychopath having a greatly exaggerated CV are very, very high. I would say a 100% probability. Now, Babiak and his research found that normally 1/3 of CV content is padded or fabricated. But they concede also that although there's a small semantic difference, there is a huge ethical difference between marketing yourself positively and making an outright misrepresentation. Saying that you have an MSc degree, whether you in fact have a BSc degree. Might be a typing error, probably not. Then, after being lied to on paper, we face the culprit for an interview where we really get lied to. Because psychopaths are so charming and so manipulative, they tell us exactly what we want to hear in the interview. Now, if you're an experienced, I'm going to use the polite word and say interviewer as opposed to interrogator, the big problem lies therein that you start to think that you're very good at detecting deception or reading people. You're definitely in for a rude surprise. It doesn't matter how much experience you have in the field, you cannot see what's going on between someone's ears, as much as you would like to believe otherwise. Then, of course, after being suitably charmed, we make the appointment and we can repent at leisure for the toxic individual that we've introduced to the organization. And for this reason, just before you come to the conclusion that we've given you good food and bad news and no more, I believe that there is a solution. You simply have to do recruitment properly. You have to take it seriously. I'm speaking to all of you in your capacity as leaders and or soon to be leaders. You can't farm your responsibility out to an outside agency for your recruitment. Line management, senior management has to be involved. Just as it is with academic journals, so it is in the workplace. The strongest criteria to meet is that of peer review. The people who will be working with the candidate are in a better position to describe whether the individual is a proper fit with the organization or not. So let's go back to the beginning. First of all, and this is now my suggested recruitment process as soon as possible. So the moment I stop talking, you all rush off to your organizations and you make sure that you start recruiting this way. First of all, find out whether you really need to make the appointment, what the person is going to do. This seems obvious, but hiring simply for the sake of hiring is a mistake. Clive Body of Australia says that we should guard against the wording we use in advertising, because advertising for charming people who've lived life on the edge and are results driven, etc., is a surefire recipe for attracting the wrong candidates. They put this to the test and found exactly that. Using wording such as that, they attracted a number of subcriminal psychopaths applying for the jobs that the researchers were posting. The second point, when it comes to resumes and verification thereof, take an investigative approach. Don't phone the phone number that the applicant has supplied on his resume for you to phone the organization where he or she ostensibly did a great job. Find the organization by yourself. We've seen anecdotal evidence of psychopaths leaving out of their resumes employers where they were fired from for either stealing or some other wrongdoing, stretching the dates of prior employment and later employment to make up for this. In the investigation, I would urge you to also check for a criminal record. South Africans love to do credit checks. I humbly submit that the fact that someone wasn't able to pay Edgar's in Christmas of 2009 really doesn't carry the same weight as having served time in prison during Christmas of 2009 for fraud and theft. In the northern suburbs, people are far too genteel to go near a police station, wouldn't be seen dead, going to ask for a criminal record of a potential applicant. And yet when they want to emigrate to Australia, those very same people will stand in the very same queue at the very same police station waiting for a police clearance certificate, which is a criminal record. The point here is it is simpler and easier to verify a resume than to make the wrong appointment. After you've done this, I propose that in the third instance, you test the candidate. I'm very much in favor of clinical testing to measure for the presence of psychopathy or a significant degree thereof. I believe that in labor law terms, if you do this consistently, without exception, you are perfectly within the limits of the law to do so. I'm also in favor of vocational testing, i.e., the job that the person is supposed to be doing or will be doing, put them in a scenario where you test exactly that. And then in the final instance, South African law does make provision for a probation period, after which both parties can end their relationship with no ill consequences. providing, of course, that this is done procedurally correct. But my submission is that if you're going to do your recruitment properly, then doing probation supervision properly is just the icing on the cake. Now, I would like you to ask us difficult questions. Thank you.